Welcome to part 2 of my chat with Rebecca Hall Gruyter, who shared her story of abuse as a child and how it led her to move from being an invisible victim to being visible and shining. I'm María Tomás-Keegan, your host of From Upside Down to Right Side Up. I'm honored to share inspiring stories like Rebecca's, stories of reaching out and rising up, because they help us to know that we are not alone as our worlds turn upside down. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing your story.
My pleasure. I'm honored to be here today.
As we ended the first segment, we promised to talk about more about the emotional struggles you went through and how they led to you making the choice to stop being invisible. And I understand that there is a turning point for you. Mm-hmm. Would you share that with us?
I would be thrilled to. And one thing I've discovered about a healing journey, and maybe some of you have as well, it's a continual journey. There's not just some moment that you arrive and you don't continue to grow and stretch and heal as you discover new layers, new levels, new ways that you can be hiding, that we can be shrinking back instead of leaning in. And if I go back to those years of intense healing, I used to have conversations with God. I used to say, okay, God, I shouldn't have to do this next steps, tell the truth, stand in this place, step forward in this way that felt vulnerable and scary and stretching to me, because I felt like I had suffered enough. I shouldn't have to do these things. And I would wrestle and I would go back to God and I say, okay, but I will do this mean, hard, horrible thing I really don't think I should have to do. If it can make a difference for another little girl, I will do this. Because I had learned to care more for others than for myself. And that would help move me forward. And it took a little while longer to start loving myself too. And so every step of the journey, that was the conversation I would have. And every step I took, I survived. And I became a little bit more courageous and I built those muscles. But just to give you an idea of how severe this was, that I could barely stand up in front of people, 2 or more people, and say my name, much less answer a question, before I would start to shake and my ears would ring, I'd turn purple, I would start to shut down on a cellular level. Like it remembered what happened before and that my body was protecting me. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty severe being in, and it was so scary to even stand up in that space. And that's college and beyond is what that was like for me. And eventually I did go to college. I pushed myself and I learned a secret. So everyone wants to lean in. I learned you can actually hide in the public eye too. I discovered that smile, hiding behind that smile, I could use that. I could put on my uniform or my outfit and look a certain way and shoes and everything. And that gave me courage to step forward. And then eventually I grew into that place of being and I became more courageous and I was able to take away a layer of hiding. So sometimes I feel like there is this bridge that we need to start doing that. But that was something that helped me. And I stepped forward and frequently was put in a leadership position and speaking, HR, and finance. I ended up in the world of finance for the later part of my career and was empowering people around money, was stepping into that public eye more and more. And it was very meaningful work. And then I felt like I was being called to start telling my story, like my real story. And I was hesitant. I felt like I shouldn't have to. That's not what financial advisors talk about. It's going to be weird. It's going to make people uncomfortable. There are so many other people that are way more qualified than me to be able to do this and make a difference. And I wrestled and had lots of reasons why I shouldn't. But the part that pulled me forward was inside. I still had that desire. If it can make a difference for one little girl, if it can make a difference for one person, if what I had to say would help, I was willing to be scared. I was willing to be vulnerable. I was willing to be uncomfortable and stretched. And as I wrestled, feeling that calling on my heart, I talked with God, same kind of conversation. I shouldn't have to. I don't believe I'm the best qualified for this. Lots of reasons why. And I will step forward if it can make a difference for another. But I don't want to do anything on radio, nothing on television, no cameras, no filming, no recording, no books. I don't want to speak to more than 50 people at a time because I can't make an impact. I had all these contingencies and boundaries. And the thing is, nobody was actually asking me to do any of those things at that time. They were just the scariest things I could think of to help me say no and have a reason not to. But when I tapped in the reason to, was if it could make a difference for another, that pulled me forward. And so I told God, okay, I will do this. And I gave him all my contingencies. And there was silence. And I felt like he came back to me and said, Rebecca, this is yes or no, period. Will you go where I call you to go and share what I call you to share or not? It is your choice. Yes, period, or no, period. Choose. And I said, yes. And within 3 months, I was on a stage, live stream, 300 people in the room. Live stream meaning there were more than 300 people that were watching in. And it felt like an endless audience, 7 minutes to share my story. I was shaking. I had 2 book deals in the works, several radio interviews, a television show interview that I felt particularly tricked to do, but again, knew it could make a difference. I don't even know what I said. I was out of my body and I shared my story. And I was shaking, I cried, but I knew in my heart there was someone in the room that needed what I had to say. Got a standing ovation I never saw because I was out of my body. And when I got off the stage, there were a lineup of men and women that looked endless to me. And the first one came to me and they go, Rebecca, thank you for sharing. I was the one. And then the next person said the same thing, and the next, and the next. And then they started to shift what they were saying and saying, Rebecca, I could tell you were scared. So I didn't hide it. No matter how cool I was trying to be, I didn't hide it. And they said, but you cared enough about me to do it anyway. Thank you. That gives me courage. I'm inspired by that. In fact, I'm going to go do this. And on and on. It was very overwhelming and powerful to take in. And here's what I learned. I learned that I didn't have to be perfect. Whoa, what freedom there is in that. I didn't have to be perfect.
Yes.
Just willing. And that gave me courage. And part of, if I just flash back to being on that stage, because we were talking about emotions a little bit, and I was scared, and I was facing some of my greatest fears in that moment. And I felt a little bit like I had to. And I decided if I needed to walk off stage to keep myself safe, I would. And I actually looked at the easiest pathway to get off gracefully and exit. And I gave myself full permission without judgment, but love and support. If I needed that, I had that. So every 30 seconds, I stayed on that stage. I was choosing to be there. And that became very personally empowering to me and moving, that I could stand even in my fear and share and make a difference.
That's so important to hear, Rebecca, that when you choose to tell your story for a purpose that is bigger than you, that there's some power within you, there's power around you, whatever you believe is your motivation and your strength, your foundation that allows you to do that. Even though you're scared, you can still do it when you focus on the power within. So I like to think about fear I get it all the time when I'm speaking in front of a group of people, turning that fear into something else, turning it into excitement, turning it into, in your case, that that understanding that there's some one person out there in that audience who needs to hear what you have to say, and that spurs you on. I love that. That's just powerful. And I love what you said about choosing to be imperfect and allowing that to be the case. I look forward to hearing what you will share in our last segment. This is when you get to tell us more of those lessons and be able to share those so women can know that they're not alone.
Yes.
And they have choices. We always have choices. So I want to hear more about that. Stay tuned, everyone, for our wrap-up with Rebecca. I'm María Tomás-Keegan. Till next time.